Everybody, and welcome. Tonight is the 14th, Tuesday, July 14th, 2020, and I'll call the Finance Committee for this evening to order. We have a quorum of members present. We are missing Alder Ryan. She did mention that she may join us on WebEx later. She had an appointment that she thought may conflict with this meeting. So, was that her logging on? No? Okay. All right. So if Alder Ryan joins, we'll recognize her accordingly. The first item on our agenda is the minutes of our previous meeting, June 9th of 2020 and June 23rd of 2020. I did notice one correction that needs to be made in those minutes, and let me grab it quick because I circled it on my copy. Here. On the June 23rd minutes, I noted that when we were talking about the storage of the stone mill building, Rasmussen commented it makes sense to preserve this building, which appears to figure prominently into the South Riverfront Design Plan. It's South Riverfront Design Plan. So we need to correct self to south, just for logical flow. That was the only thing I noted. Did anyone else notice any corrections or revisions to the minutes that are needed? If not, then I would entertain a motion to approve them both. Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Herbst. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action on amendment of the revenue policy to include the State of Wisconsin statewide debt collection program. And you'll recall from the minutes in your packets, it sounds like if we were to utilize the statewide debt collection program, there's a more robust collection effort that happens, and the chances are we could recover more of our money because it sounds like the fees are a little lower there. Mary Ann, do you have anything that you want to walk us through with regard to the packet material?
Well, just as you said, today we're using tax intercept, which is the state looking for a tax refunds and using that to pay us for delinquent receivables we have. With their statewide collection, they're using that tax intercept program, but they're also interacting with our debtors to, develop payment plans. If the people fail to make installments, they can go as so far as to do wage attachments and bank levies. So it really provides a lot more clout. And then, with a traditional collection agency, you're going to give up probably at least 50% of your revenue to that collection agency. In this situation, the state adds on a collection fee to the debtor, so we'll collect, in theory, 100% of our revenue. And then the state's collection arm would deem whether they think something is uncollectible and return it back to us. So then we could, write it off at that time, or we could choose to pursue another collection means.
Okay. So, committee members, any questions on that item? If not, is there a motion then to amend the policy to include that plan? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 3. Our airport manager has requested that we defer this item to next month. He had an unexpected, it sounds like a family matter that he had to attend to, so he will not be with us tonight. So we will hold off on item 3 and bring that back for next month. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action on abatement of late fees for pet licenses for 2020. And you'll see in the meeting packet materials that we have nearly 1,000 pets who are not yet renewed on their dog license, partly due to COVID-19. There were some shutdowns in the vet clinics. I mean, obviously, those are now largely open, but people have not gotten caught up on those licenses and those vaccines and documents that they need to get licensed. Of course, this would give them an extension, and it would waive off the penalty. Our penalty for failing to license under normal circumstances is pretty severe, but it works to get compliance. But in the realm of COVID-19, where people are really struggling, it may be enough of a chore for them to just get legal with that pet, let alone pay those fines. So we should have, a little discussion and make a decision about abating those late fees and just collecting the standard fee if they're coming into license. What do you guys think?
I guess I really don't have a problem with it. I mean, is it mostly because of the, people not coming into City Hall to pay the fees? Or, because I know that, I didn't pay the fee this year because the dog passed away, but other than that, it's,
They're able to also pay online and stuff, so I don't
Yeah.
know that it's the not coming in, but maybe not being able to get vet appointments and things might
Yeah.
be.
We did get a couple of feedback from people. So, with our new software, we did email invoices to people, and we heard from some people that they didn't get the invoice, though the protocol that we followed is if the email came back like a rejection, how you'll get a kickback that email is no longer valid or it's not valid, then we mailed out the invoice. But we don't know if perhaps some of the invoices went into people's
Spam folders?
spam folders. And then if that's the case, either they forgot about it or now because there's a late fee, they're just hoping to, not cause any problems and then renew next year because, this has always been one of these weird situations where we didn't know exactly what to do, because historically, if you think back before we were invoicing people, so back before we went online with our pet licenses, we would send out applications to people, and it was in their tax bill, here's a pet license application, but we didn't send out invoices to specific individuals, and we didn't do any follow-through on collecting from someone. So if you, lived, let's say, I'll just use myself. I've lived in my house for 25 years. If one year I licensed the pet and the next year I didn't, no one asked me, why did you not license your pet, in year 2? And then in year 3, if I licensed my pet again, we would come in, take that next year's pet license. So we've been kind of wringing our hands about, well, what do we do if someone doesn't license in year 2 and then comes back in year 3? Should we be saying, you need to license for year 2 and add late penalties? We don't do that today. We just start the year over again. So it really is kind of a unusual situation, but we did hear that it was hard to get into the vets to vaccinate, so then you can't license because your vaccination isn't up to date. We heard about the money problems. We heard about not being able, for people who won't do the online, we heard you couldn't get into City Hall. It's a variety of excuses and, complaints. But we just thought, why not eliminate the complaint of the late charge?
Right.
Given all of the challenges that 2020 has presented to people, and and I realize it looks like I have a contradiction. My memo said to August 31st, and then when I did the resolution, I must have felt even more generous because the resolution says September 15th. So you can
We can pick a
clarify.
date?
Yeah, pick a date. But
We've been working, I guess, to find ways that we can help residents and help businesses that have been struggling, and so this really strikes me as one of those things. I mean, certainly to not add insult to injury by enforcing a late fee in this realm that we're living in. That said, when we first started down this path of online licensing and licensing enforcement, and we didn't have a humane officer at first, our animal licensing compliance rate when we began, at least when I was new on the council, was about 10% of the total pets in the area. And so by upping the penalties and offering incentives for spay-neuter and making it an online process, making it easier for people to do, and then bringing on a follow-up system where people actually contact you and say, hey, you failed to license your animal in year 2 or year 3 or whatever, that compliance skyrocketed. So we have way fewer people than we've ever had that were late, but under these circumstances, it seems like they're falling behind. So this seems like a reasonable proposal.
and now that you mentioned the vaccinations, I know we didn't have any of the vaccination clinics this year, and those are very popular events.
Same thing with the
And
microchips.
And that was, if you go to that free clinic, you have to license your pet at the conclusion, so.
I
Right.
think we actually did sneak one in
Right before the
away,
shutdown.
Right before the shutdown,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep,
But-
right before, but, so, yeah, do we have a motion then from the committee to abate the late fee for the animal license? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries.
So then we'll be mailing out the notices to people
Mm-hmm.
with a letter saying late fees have been abated till September 15th?
Yeah, right, we were going to pick a date. September 15th, good
Yeah,
with you
no
guys?
later date is.
Let's go with
that's-
September 15th.
That gives them 60 days.
Yeah.
Sure, that's fair. Okay. Let's see here. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on amendment of the capital policy to reflect the new capital improvement committee. And you'll see that in our internal policy, we've just reworded it to remove that the CIP request would be vetted by the committee of the whole, and we've changed that to the CIP committee, which has been formed. So this is just in keeping, kind of a housekeeping thing. Does anyone have questions on that? Okay, is there a motion then to approve that policy amendment? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Herbst. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action on request for proposals for municipal fleet management consulting services. And you'll see in your packets, what we're seeking to do is go to RFP for someone to look at all facets of how we manage our vehicle fleet and the facility that works on them, how we manage vehicle leasing, how we manage procurement of vehicles, how we get rid of vehicles that are ready to be gotten rid of, what the replacement cycle looks like. There's a pretty detailed proposal here. I know over time, I have heard a number of, either complaints or questions or suggestions about all of those facets and how we could either do them better or faster or more efficiently, but we've not undertaken a wholesale review of how that works. And so, I don't know if, Mary Ann, if you want to walk us through
Well,
the proposal.
I think you did a good job summarizing. I think, we kind of are in a situation here where, we've been trying to absorb more of the fleet within the motor pool, and that, has been good, but it has also created more pressure on the motor pool from both a financial standpoint and from a human resources standpoint. So the mechanics, and all of the staff are busier because they have more fleet and more specialized fleet, and prioritization between, public safety and the street maintenance is, can be problematic. We want to make sure that the rates that we're charging, the hourly rates or the per mile rates, are going to be sufficient to, fund future acquisition of the fleet. And like I said, by adding the fire department in there, that's created, a huge burden because those are very expensive pieces of
Right.
equipment. So it seemed, and, we've had departments coming up with ideas to decentralize again and, bring motor pool or mechanic maintenance back within their department. And it seemed like it would be good to have someone come in and actually review it.
It would, and I know that we've had some issues over the past year where we've had, the fleet management was so bogged down with all of the, tasks that are associated with that. We've had times where they've ended up ordering cars late. They've had times where they've released RFPs for equipment to go in the vehicles that were on a rush basis because they were behind the 8 ball with the order. They've had, situations where in the winter, snow removal equipment gets a priority. So there's times that you'd have maybe a public safety vehicle out of service for 2 weeks over a broken seatbelt because, they're working on other stuff. And so that's created pressure between the departments as well. So I think to look at the flow of that certainly makes sense. And we've been leasing now for 3 years, 4 years. And just to see the effectiveness of that, because it's a super expensive lease, but they also take care of all the maintenance when there's stuff wrong with them. So that's worth looking at as well. Does anybody else have input on the RFP as far as the way it's constructed? Or do you want to just, if you want to proceed, we can take a motion to move it forward?
And a variety of the stakeholders, people from, Mark Hansen reviewed it, police reviewed it, Eric reviewed it, and they all support the information that we're requesting from the consultant, so I think that's good.
Well, and I like that you
Everybody's
included the
open to-
facility planning here as well, because we know that there needs to be some phased upgrades at DPW, because those buildings are, some of those facilities are nearing end of life, or some are beyond that. So it's good to have that incorporated in there as well for where they work on the stuff as well. Do we have a motion then to move the RFP forward? Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Let's see here. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for hot mix. And you'll see a memo from Public Works in your packets outlining the fact, and we've talked about this in SISM as a way to kind of, I guess I wouldn't say get ahead of, because we're never really ahead of road maintenance, but to use the concept of skin patch, which is a thin layer of asphalt over a street to buy it 5 to 7 years of useful life, rather than this pothole patching, quilting looking arrangement of spot repairs that they do on a lot of streets that it is not necessarily effective, because sometimes those patches pop right out and they're right back there all the time. And so we were hoping in SISM also that something like this could be tried. They're looking at some milling and paving equipment to do this work at DPW. So this would shift some line items in their budget and free up some resources for them to get that asphalt and start that in some areas that are, where the infrastructure is decent underneath, or decent enough underneath. This could buy us a little bit of time. We have the Public Works Director with us. Does anyone have questions for him on the plan at all?
Yeah, is something like this, would this give us the ability to repair more roads? Because I know there's a couple of streets in my district where they're so far off the schedule for a complete redo that people are, they're completely frustrated.
That was
at
the
it.
hope. The residential street backlog on the list we got in SISM totals $90 million. And so some people's streets that are already rough are like 10 years out.
Yeah.
Oh, here, welcome, Eric. Come and
Right.
talk us through this.
So the idea is that we'd be moving our operations a little bit, kind of like from how the organization has been doing things to something that may save us money in the long run. We have areas of the streets throughout the winter where we go out and put cold mix in, 2 to 3 weeks later, we're back out there filling the same hole because it just continues to pop out. And this is really an idea, as Lisa said, it's kind of a skin patch. We do have a coal planer, which can plane out, small areas and things like that. This is not where we would do 5 or 6 blocks. This is where we would look at a stretch on a roadway, we might get 1 or 2 blocks skin patched, the worst sections. If we have one side by a curb that's all broken up, we might be able to, save that, or at least get another 5 to 6 years out of it. And so right now, when we're plowing in the winter on some of these streets, basically we're taking the blacktop that's on there and peeling it up and putting it onto the boulevard. And those are really the areas that we want to stop doing that. Because it creates a lot more issues with freezing, thawing, and things like that, and then our guys are constantly going out. So we hope by kind of changing our operations, getting away from crack sealing and contracting that out, that we'd have more people on the paving crew. We just purchased a little bit larger paver down at streets, and so engineering and streets are going to get together this week and kind of try to start itemizing a street list and sections of streets throughout the city that we think are good candidates for this. It's not all going to be done this year, so we're hoping to just kind of ramp up that hot mix budget starting this year and moving forward with that type of operation, so.
Yep. But somewhere in between, a full reconstruct, which is beyond expensive, and the residents all get assessed, and then asphalt overlay, which you can only get so far on the funds we have.
Right.
That somewhere between that and pothole filling would be this.
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
you could probably put one big patch in and really, I guess, improve at least a block or two. And, maybe there's an awful lot of complaints about infrastructure, and when you tell somebody their street is on the list for 2031, they're not really comforted too much. So it's, hopefully it'll give us a little boost. So, Ms. Herbst?
This is totally off the record, but I really truly
But you're on the
think-
record.
Well, we'll eliminate it. You really need to consult with the surgeons, because whatever glue they use when they put you back together after surgery has got to work on the roads. Check into that stuff.
That's
Maybe
what
we
we
could check
need.
into that. Yeah,
That's what we
thanks,
got to
Don.
get. It's good
Thanks
stuff.
for listening.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion then to approve this line item transfer so we can give this a try? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. Let's see, item number 8 is discussion and possible action regarding the installation of glass barrier in the customer service area for disease protection. And you've got a memo from Mary Ann in your packets talking about, and I think we've all seen, if you've been to the clerk's office, the temporary solution that was put up there. It certainly was meant for short-term use. It certainly wasn't meant to have any permanence, but this is a more permanent solution. It certainly makes it easier for them to talk to people because they'll have some, microphone equipment and things where people can hear better. I'll say I support this too because years ago, we talked about security in our building, and we talked about security for the front counter staff because they are so close to people, and not everyone that comes in is super happy with whatever they've got to deal with. And so I think having a little firmer barrier to access versus being able to reach across the counter towards someone, it just adds an element of safety beyond the disease protection part. So they have a sealed window like this. If you go down to the police department to get an accident report, you know that there's a no access barrier there, but you can still hear them. This would be similar. And and it looks like this barrier area where we're going to need barriers is going to last a while yet. So the temporary solution was probably good for a couple months, but it's certainly not optimal. So does anyone have questions about the plan, or is there a motion to approve this plan and move it ahead?
Yeah, I think you kind of, you answered the question, because I was going to mention the same thing about, I think, it was 2 or so years ago, we were talking about hardening City Hall.
We were.
And we were we didn't want to go the full route, but I think everybody was amenable to extra security in the customer service area. So I was going to ask that if this included, if the barrier was sufficient enough that it would prevent, I don't want to say anything hostile or of that
hostile's
nature,
a
but
real
it would,
thing, too,
but
yeah.
it's definitely more, it would be, if there was a threat, either real or perceived, it would be an effective barrier.
Well, it's a slowdown. I
yeah.
think in a perfect world, you'd have fortified glass there. So, it would be able to take some impact and not give immediate access as well.
Yeah.
This, I think, is proposed for normal glass, correct? Or is it,
No,
is
it
it
would
a,
be, it would be.
is it a safety glass?
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, if it was
So-
like a laminated kind of glass,
Right.
but it's not like, the stuff that's 3 inches thick in front of your
No,
bank teller.
not bulletproof, but
Yeah,
somewhere between?
yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
Ms. Herbst?
Reading this in the packet, is a lot of this coming from grants that will pay for this?
Yes.
Okay, and my other concern then would be, it isn't a concern, I support this, but if we have this, will the employees still have to wear the mask and the shields behind this?
Well, so I think, right now, we don't have a mask requirement, but if we did, they probably would because they're not 6 feet apart. One of the provisions here, if you walk in the front lobby, there is a spot where you can see it was patched. And we are proposing that we would open that up and put glass there too. Again, it would help us, we would be able to put customer service reps there for the presidential election, and we would be able to support more activity then. And that would allow us to separate the staff. And we are looking at putting some sneeze guards in between the staff. So, my understanding, like I said, at HR, is that, wearing the masks, as we all know, is supposed to reduce the passage of the disease from one person to the other. But it doesn't change how we have to behave if someone comes down with the illness. We would still have to, have everyone quarantined. So I guess if we develop a mask policy, and if we had glass, I'm not sure. I think then they wouldn't have to wear masks if they were sitting at their desk, because we would have that additional layer of protection, but I'm not 100% certain.
My personal thought is that, given the results of the HR meeting, I think that there has been a whole lot of politicization of the mask mandate process, and I think it's ironic that people would see that. In my mind, when I saw the idea that we would look at something like that, it seemed to me that it was more of a dress code type issue, and this should be something that should not even need to be legislated by a committee or a council. And, that mandate should just come down from the top, and filter out through the workforce. But whether or not that succeeds now, I mean, obviously, the state of Wisconsin's been able to do it, Marathon County's been able to do it, the UW system has been able to do it, and for some reason, without drama and controversy, we can't do it. So that said, we have to do something to protect our workers, and if that means we have to partition this off and put a barrier between them and the public at the very least, I think this makes sense. It's an expensive solution, but, like we said, it's not only about germs. So, Mayor?
Yeah, I guess I would just add on to that. It would protect people from the outside, but not from their colleagues. We've been talking a lot about your colleagues are kind of in your bubble, so that was kind of the thought process. Now, even if we put partitions in between people, if one of the employees comes down with COVID, they would all have to be quarantined while they're tested and things like that. So, those are a lot of things. I would hate to wipe out our entire clerk's office. That'd be terrible. But, that's a discussion for a different committee.
Right.
But yeah, I fully support this. And a lot of other municipalities, I've been talking to them, have been opting to put this kind of a barrier in place. And it is covered, so it's a really good time to do this.
Well, and it's one thing that, I guess a lot of people never thought about this before a pandemic, but when we first put up the temporary solution, and I came down to City Hall to vote in April, and so I was talking with one of the staff at the window, and she said, every morning, our maintenance guy comes and he cleans this barrier. And she said, you would not believe how dirty that is. And at that point, City Hall was only open 2 hours a day. So they weren't seeing everyone all day long. And she said, you cannot believe how much stuff is all over the outside of that. And how many people's particles have I been showered with for 14 years? And I mean, it was just not something that people were mindful of, but now you're mindful of all of that. And so, pandemic or not, I mean, it just seems like it's a good thing to have for us. So, do we have a motion and a second? Yet we have not. Do we have a motion to move this item forward and fund it? Motion by Watson, second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Let's see here. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for the sign shop. You'll see that the sign shop is in need of some storage for materials and adequate count of their inventory. And so they've submitted a proposal for some C-Tech cabinets that would accomplish that for them. And they've got a couple of line item transfers within their budget to pay for it with, so it wouldn't be new funding. Anybody have questions for Eric on that? Or if not, we'll take a motion to approve it since it appears to be paid for. Motion by Herbst. Is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Let's see. Item number 10 is presentation of the City of Whassa 2019 Popular Report, and we'll welcome Bobby up to walk us through that. Hi.
All right, hi. So again, my name is Bobby. I'm the Assistant Finance Director for the city. So I'm hoping you've had a chance to go over the city's new popular financial report that was included in your packet. So rather than repeat all of the information that was in there, I'll just kind of talk about why I created the report. So the intention of the popular financial report is to extract information from the city's comprehensive annual financial report, which has over 170 pages of detailed financial information, and to put that in a much more easily understandable report for the general public and for any other interested parties who may not have a background in public finance. The popular report only has 10 pages and gives a more basic or educational look into the city's fiscal affairs. And it has charts and pictures and all kinds of fun stuff to illustrate its main points. And as a side note, the comprehensive report will be presented to you at the next finance meeting from our auditors at CLA. The popular report also ties information from the comprehensive report into information that we have in other formal financial reports that we prepare, such as the capital improvements plan, the tax increment district reports that Mary Ann creates, and the city budget. So it gives readers more insight into how the financial numbers tie to the plans and projects that the city has taken on. The popular report also allows us to incorporate some trend analysis and combine our financial data with other statistical information to give readers a better narrative into the city's fiscal activities and compare financial metrics from year to year rather than being solely focused on the city's financial report performance in a single year, which is really the focus of the comprehensive financial report. And so some of the information in the popular report is focused on topics that I believe are of most importance to the citizens, such as property taxes and a breakdown of what those taxes fund, general fund revenues, expenses, and fund balances over time, overall debt activity and our general obligation debt margin, the financing of capital improvements and some of the projects that we completed in that fund recently, tax increment districts or TIDs, and a brief narrative on how TIDs work, along with the value of the city's TIDs and some highlights of recent projects that have taken place in those TIDs. And lastly, it has financial information on the water and sewer utility funds, which are the largest business type activities that the city has. And so we've submitted the popular report to the Government Finance Officers Association for their review and feedback and consideration for their award program. Only 10 government entities in the state of Wisconsin received that award for their 2018 financial reports. And I'm feeling confident that Wausau will be added to that list. So my hope in producing the report is to get more residents familiar with the city's functions and to increase their interest in participating in the development of the city's future endeavors. The more feedback we receive, of course, makes us better stewards of their money. I encourage the residents of the city of Whassa to read the popular annual financial report. It's available on the website, and we'll have paper copies available at the clerk's office for anybody who doesn't want to read it on their computer. And then anyone, in the entire city, including yourselves, can reach out to me with feedback or suggestions on information they think would be beneficial to put in the packet. It's not as strict as our comprehensive report, so we can, pretty flexible on adding information. So
Excellent.
that's all I have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. This is a great report, and I'm excited that we have it available. It's our first one. But we just this week have started to talk about ways that we can, make our budget process more easily understandable through graphics and charts and things like that, because it's a really deep document. And so, for people who want to, really dig into the nuts and bolts of that, it's a pretty tedious process. And so a number of cities have also created something like a companion document that distills it down the same way. And, those have become fairly popular. So going forward, I think we may be interested in something like that for our budget process as well, but this is awesome for year-end results. It really is. And even for us as an explanation tool when we're asked questions, it's something that we can offer to the residents, and it's way easier to explain than telling them to turn to page 347 in our budget. So it's a good thing. Let's see here. So we placed that report on file. We don't have to act on it. Item number 11, public access is asked to have that pulled until next month. They're waiting on some numbers that they don't have yet. So that item is not yet ready, so we'll hold that for August as well. Item number 12 is discussion and possible action on a parking space lease agreement with Balding Eagle Incorporated for athletic park parking. And you'll recall that in the past, athletic park overflow parking was allowed in the Wilson Herd lot behind that building. And then last season, that option was taken away, and we were not able to park people there. And that created some chagrin for Chucks fans who wanted to park down there and were used to parking down there, so we had to find some alternative collaborations. But it looks like now that there is an agreement proposed to use that parcel, again, if we pave it. And that's a pretty small price to pay for the value that brings to Athletic Park for adjacent parking. So kudos to whoever brought this forward, because I think that baseball fans will be very excited to see that they can park back there again. So, and then paving it also eliminates concerns about fluids from vehicles and things. And, it was a gravel lot and it was in pretty rough shape, and when it rained, it was even worse. So, anybody have comments on this item, or is there a motion to approve it? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, then members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That item carries. Item number 13 is discussion and possible action on a property lease agreement with Lunda Construction Company at 180 East Whassa Avenue. You'll note from the packets that Lunda Construction has been contracted to do our bridge deck work on Bridge Street Bridge, and they've asked to park some of their equipment while they're working on this site that we own. Anybody have questions for Eric on this item at all? If not, is there a motion to move it forward? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by, oh, city attorney. Come on up, Ann. Sorry. She was way in the back.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I thought Eric would jump up for me, but if he's had any discussion with them, maybe he can fill in for me. I think they provided us this copy, correct, Eric? Yes, and I don't know that we've ever done this before, but it's a great idea. I mean, if they're using up city property to store or stage their storage or whatever, that's a benefit to them, and we can make some money on it. But that's not a legal question for me, but paragraph 3 has monthly rent of blank. And you should probably have some discussion on what you think you should charge, and if you have any idea what you think they should pay, or you've talked to them, Eric, come on up. That's the only thing I'd ask you to discuss and recommend in your lease provision, please.
Is to pick a dollar?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations, Eric, for maybe what they've experienced in other areas? I think that the fact that they offered this up, they're probably paying at other places.
Yeah, and I think it varies, really depending on, this is an advantage to us, to have them here and to be able to use this property. I would say it wouldn't be a lot, but whatever that is, I'd have to have some flexibility to negotiate with them. I'm not exactly sure what the construction completion date is, but I think something maybe around the lines of $300.
Flat fee, not a
Yeah,
monthly?
right, and
Okay.
then maybe that's where we can start and talk to them about that and figure that out.
Sure.
If that's reasonable for the finance
Definitely. I
committee.
mean, we would expect to accommodate our contractors anyway. So what are your thoughts, committee? Should we set that amount at 300 flat? Okay, so we'll include that in our motion to approve then to set the dollar figure at 300 flat. Okay? All right. Now,
Thank
did we
you.
take that vote yet? We have not. No, we have not. All right, so with a motion and a second on the floor, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Last item is item 14, discussion and possible action on creating a sign-on bonus program. You'll see some documentation from the HR committee. This has become a practice in the private sector that's kind of gaining popularity. I think if you are able to hire employees that have either an elevated skill set or an elevated level of experience, this may act as a little bit of an inducement to attract talent where we maybe have struggled in the past. What are your thoughts on this? Or do you have questions for Tony at all on it? We could bring her up if need be. She's waving. Anyone have questions for the HR director? Or is there a motion to move it forward? It sounds like they've got a pretty decent plan outlined here, how they would manage it, so.
Yeah, we had a pretty good discussion at the HR committee last night on this, and it's a general agreement that it's worth giving the department heads and the HR department that level of discretion to see, because there are some chronically difficult spots to, that the city's been trying to fill.
There are, and sometimes if you're looking to attract experienced employees from other areas that have already gained a certain volume of vacation or attained a certain wage, and they're unwilling to start over
Yeah.
at a new job, I think giving that leeway is certainly helpful.
And,
So-
and one of the concerns, or that we brought up at the meeting is there is a clawback. So if they separate, within the first 3 years, there's a sliding
Yep,
scale.
I saw a step down for
Yeah.
that, so for a payback, that's a good safeguard too. So just in case if there's something that has quite a bit of turnover.
Yep.
And I like
Okay.
the idea that there's going to be criteria.
Yeah.
And it's not just applied blanketly.
Right.
So
Right. So,
that was
yeah,
also
so if you
good.
get a good one that meets the criteria, it certainly makes sense, so, all right. And so, I'll take a motion then to move this item forward. Motion by Herbst, is there a second?
A second.
Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries as well. As I said, we'll hold over those other two items, 3 and 11, for next month. And that's the end of our agenda, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I won't ask for opposed because no one ever is. So we'll stand adjourned, and then Common Council will start in this chamber then at 6:30. Thanks, everyone.